The tenant above. The trick to lasting a long time isn't strength. It isn't speed. It isn't any of the things the movies tell you. It's being boring. I have been boring in this building since 1984. I pay my rent in money orders. I tip the super at Christmas. I do not make eye contact in the elevator, and I do not complain about the radiator, and once a year, usually in April, when the new tenants are moving in, and nobody notices an extra face in the hallway, I leave for 2 weeks and tell anyone who asks that I was visiting my sister in Pennsylvania. I do not have a sister. I have not had a sister since the Taft administration. For 40 years, boring was enough. And then, 6 months ago, a woman moved into the apartment above mine. And I have not been bored since. My name doesn't matter. I've had 9 of them, and the one on my lease is no more real than the other 8. What matters is that I am very old, and I am very careful, and I have spent the last century learning that the most dangerous thing a person like me can be is interesting. I came to this city in 1962. I bought into this building in 1984, when the neighborhood was still the kind of place where nobody asked questions and the landlord was happy to take cash. I've owned my apartment under 3 different names since then. The current one, the one on the buzzer downstairs, has been mine for 19 years. In another 6, I'll sell it to myself again, and the man who lives in 3B will quietly disappear, and a new man with a different name will move in. Nobody will notice. Nobody ever does. I live on the 3rd floor. 3 floors is the sweet spot, low enough that I can leave through the window if I have to. High enough that street noise doesn't reach me. I don't sleep exactly. What I do is closer to what your phone does when you set it down for a while, but I prefer to do it somewhere quiet. I keep the apartment dim. Heavy curtains, of course, but also a kind of clutter that makes it look lived in. Books I've actually read. A record player I actually use. Photographs on the mantle of people who are real and who are all dead now, and whose names I still remember because forgetting them feels like a betrayal I'm not willing to commit. I do not bring people home. That is the first rule, and it is the only one that has never bent. I feed quietly. I feed rarely. I have not killed anyone since 1971, and that one was a mistake, and I have spent 53 years making sure I never make it again. The city is full of hospitals and blood banks, and the kind of late-night clinics where a man who looks tired and pays in cash is not memorable. I take what I need, I leave, I come home and I read, and I listen to records, and I am boring. That was the rhythm of my life, 40 years of it, in this building. I have watched 4 different families move in and out of the apartment above mine. I have learned the footsteps of every one of them. The young couple in the 90s who fought about money. The widower who lived there alone for 11 years and watched the same 3 TV shows on a loop. The grad student who moved out the moment she finished her dissertation. The family of 4 who lasted exactly long enough to realize their kids needed a yard. I knew their footsteps. I knew their schedules. I knew when they came home and when they left, and after a while I stopped noticing them at all, the way you stop noticing the hum of your own refrigerator. And then, in October, the apartment above mine went up for rent again, and a woman moved in, and from the very first night something was wrong. The first thing I noticed was that I couldn't hear her. Now, I want to be clear about what I mean by that. I don't mean she was quiet. Quiet people still make noise. The widower was quiet. He still creaked the floorboards when he got up to use the bathroom at 3 in the morning. The grad student was quiet. I still heard her cough sometimes when she was working late. This woman made no sound at all. The first night she moved in, I heard the movers come and go. I heard the door close behind them. And then nothing. Not a footstep, not a faucet, not the click of a light switch. I waited, the way you wait for a clock to tick when you've just realized the room is silent, and the tick never came. I told myself she was tired. I told myself she'd gone straight to bed. But the next morning, I heard her leave for work. The door opened, the door closed. That was the only sound. No footsteps in the hallway, no elevator chime. She was simply gone, the way a thought is gone when you stop thinking it. I have lived among humans for a very long time. I know what they sound like. They are loud, even when they don't mean to be. Their hearts are loud, their breath is loud, their joints crack and their stomachs gurgle, and their bodies announce themselves in 100 small ways every second of every day. This woman did none of that. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself the building was old, and the floors were thicker than I remembered, and that I had simply gotten used to the previous tenant. I told myself a great many things over the next 2 weeks, and none of them were true, and I knew none of them were true, and still I kept telling them to myself because the alternative was unthinkable. The alternative was that something had moved in above me, and I did not know what it was. I saw her for the first time on a Thursday. I was coming back from a feeding, a clean one, a clinic on 41st, where the night nurse takes cash and asks no questions, and I was in the lobby, checking my mail, when the elevator opened. She stepped out. I want to describe her to you, and I find that I cannot. Not because she was strange to look at. She was not. She was a woman in her 30s, maybe 40s, with dark hair cut short and a long coat the color of wet stone. She was pretty in the unremarkable way that pretty people are pretty when they don't want to be noticed. She had a canvas bag over her shoulder and a paperback book in one hand. I am telling you what she looked like, and I am telling you the truth, and I am also telling you that none of it is right. Looking at her was like looking at a photograph of a person you've never met. All the information was there, none of it added up to anyone. She walked past me. She did not look at me. She didn't not look at me either. She did the thing humans do, the small acknowledgement, the half-second of eye contact that says, I see you, I am not a threat, please do the same. She did it perfectly. She did it the way an actor does it. Like she had practiced. She walked out the front door of the building, and the door closed behind her, and I stood in the lobby with my mail in my hand, and I realized that I had been holding my breath. I do not need to breathe. I have not needed to breathe in 160 years. I had been holding my breath anyway. I started keeping notes. This is not something I do. I have spent a century cultivating the habit of not keeping records. No journals, no photographs, no anything that could be found and traced and used to build a picture of a life that should not, by any reasonable measure, still be ongoing. But after that night in the lobby, I sat down at my kitchen table and I wrote down everything I had observed about the woman in 4B, and I have been adding to the list ever since. It is not a long list. That is the problem. She leaves the apartment every weekday morning at 7:42. She returns every evening at 6:18. She does not deviate from this schedule. Not by a minute. Not on holidays. Not on the day in November when the city was buried under 14 inches of snow and half the building called in sick to work. She still left at 7:42 and returned at 6:18, and I do not know where she went, and I do not know what she did when she got there. She does not have visitors. She does not order food. She does not receive packages. In 6 months, the only mail I have seen delivered to 4B has been junk mail addressed to current resident, which she does not collect. It piles up in her mailbox until the super clears it out every few weeks. She does not cook. I would smell it. I can smell what every other tenant in this building cooks, and I have catalogued their preferences the way another man might catalogue his neighbor's cars. The man in 2A burns garlic. The family in 5C eats a lot of fish. The old woman in 1B has not cooked a real meal in 3 years and survives, as far as I can tell, on tea and toast. The woman in 4B has never cooked anything. Her apartment has no smell at all. That is the part that frightens me most, if I am being honest. Empty apartments smell like something. Dust, old paint, the ghost of whoever lived there last. Lived in apartments smell like their occupants. Hers smells like nothing, like a photograph of a room. I tried once to listen at her door. This was in December, about 2 months after she moved in. I had reached the point where the not knowing was worse than the possibility of being caught, and I went up to the 4th floor at 3 in the morning, when the building was as quiet as it ever gets, and I pressed my ear to her door. I want to tell you what I heard. I want to give you a satisfying detail. A whisper, a hum, a single footstep on the other side of the wood. But there was nothing. Not silence exactly. Silence is an absence of sound, and absence is something you can identify. This was, and I am struggling for the word, this was negation. It was as if the apartment on the other side of that door did not exist, as if I were pressing my ear to a wall that opened onto nothing at all. I stood there for a long time. I do not know how long. Time does strange things when you are very old, and stranger things still when you are afraid, and I am willing to admit this now, I was very afraid. And then, while my ear was still pressed to her door, she spoke. She said, "You can come in if you'd like." She did not say it through the door, she said it next to my ear, as if she were standing on my side of it, as if there were no door at all. I was on the second floor landing before I realized I had moved. I do not remember the stairs. I do not remember opening my apartment. I remember sitting on the floor of my own kitchen with my back against the cabinets, and the sun coming up outside the curtains, and the realization, slow and cold and absolute, that whatever was living above me had known I was there the entire time, had been waiting for me. I should have left. I want you to understand that I knew I should have left. I have spent a century learning to recognize the moment when a place stops being safe, and that moment had come and gone, and I had stayed anyway. I had stayed because I had nowhere else to go that I could stand to go to. I had stayed because the apartment was mine, and the building was mine, and the boring, careful, invisible life I had built inside it was the only thing I had left that felt like it belonged to me. I had stayed because, and this is the truth, and I am not proud of it, I wanted to know what she was. I have spent my whole long life believing I understood the architecture of the world. I knew what I was. I knew what other things like me were. I knew about the witches in Krakow and the strigoi in the Carpathians and the thing that lives under the lake in northern Wisconsin, and I knew the rules. The unspoken, unwritten rules that people like me live by. The careful agreements that keep us all hidden and all alive. I have met other monsters. I have shared a drink with them. I have nodded to them on the street. I did not know what the woman above me was, and after 160 years of knowing, the not knowing was unbearable. So in February, I knocked on her door. She opened it before my hand had finished moving. She was wearing the same long coat. She was holding the same paperback book. She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time, and she smiled, and her smile was the most human thing I had ever seen, and also the most wrong, because it was a smile that had been learned, and I could see the seams. She said, "I was wondering when you'd come up." Her voice was, I want to say it was lovely. It was. It was the kind of voice you'd want to hear on a long drive, but it was lovely the way a recording is lovely. It did not come from her body. It came from somewhere just slightly next to her body, the way a poorly dubbed film is almost in sync with the actors' mouths, but never quite. She stepped aside. She gestured for me to come in. And I did. The apartment was empty. I do not mean it was sparsely furnished. I mean it was empty. No furniture, no rugs, no curtains on the windows, no light fixtures in the ceiling. The walls were the bare drywall of a unit between tenants, and the floor was the bare concrete subfloor, and there was nothing in the apartment at all except the woman and me and a single wooden chair in the middle of the living room. She closed the door behind me. The lock clicked. I did not turn around. She said, "You can sit if you'd like. I know you don't need to, but it might feel better." I sat. She walked around the chair slowly, the way a curator walks around a sculpture, and she looked at me with an expression I could not read, because it was not an expression. It was the idea of one, the placeholder a person might use if they had been told what expressions were and had never quite seen one in practice. She said, "You're very old." I wasn't sure at first. "Your kind hides it well." I said, "What are you?" I did not phrase it as a question. I do not think I could have. She tilted her head. She said, "I don't have a word for it in your language. I don't have a word for it in any of your languages. I'm sorry." She crouched down in front of me, and she put her hands on her knees, and she looked up at me with that not quite an expression, and she said, "I've been here a long time. Longer than you. Longer than this city. Longer than this country. I was here when the people who were here before your people were here. I have lived in this place under many shapes, and the shape I am wearing now is the most recent, and I am very tired of it, and I am going to take a new one soon." She paused. She let me think about that. Then she said, "I wanted to meet you first, because I think you'll understand. I want to tell you that I ran. I want to tell you that I broke the chair over her head, that I went out the window, that I disappeared the way I have disappeared a dozen times before. New name, new city, new century. I want to tell you that I am writing this from somewhere far away, somewhere safe, somewhere she cannot find me. I am not. I am writing this from the third floor of the same building I have lived in for 40 years. I am writing it on the kitchen table where I once sat with my back against the cabinets, listening to my own non-existent heart. The curtains are drawn. The record player is on. I have not left this apartment in 9 days. She is still upstairs. I can hear her now for the first time. She has decided to let me hear her. Her footsteps on the floor above me, slow, patient, almost ceremonial. The opening and closing of cabinet doors that until last week I am almost certain were not there. She is preparing. I do not know what she is going to become. I do not know if she will look like the woman I met, or like me, or like someone else entirely. I do not know if she will stay in the building, or leave the building, or do something I do not have a word for. That is neither staying nor leaving. I know only this. She told me, before she let me leave her apartment, that she had been watching me for 40 years. That she had moved into 4B specifically because I was beneath her. That my carefulness, my 40 years of being boring, my century of cultivated invisibility, all of it, every bit of it, every careful habit and learned restraint and quiet life was exactly what she had been looking for. She said, "You've been so patient, so good at hiding. I have a great deal to learn from you." She said, "Don't worry, I won't hurt you. I just need to watch." And so I am writing this. And I am leaving it where it will be found eventually by someone who is not me. Because I do not think the man who lives in 3B is going to be me for very much longer. I do not think he is going to be a man at all. I think the boring, careful, invisible tenant of apartment 3B is going to keep paying his rent in money orders and tipping the super at Christmas and avoiding eye contact in the elevator. I think he is going to do all of it perfectly, more perfectly than I ever did. I think he is going to last a very long time. And I think, when you pass him in the hallway, you will not notice him at all. That is, after all, the trick.
This has been a story from the other side of now. If you enjoyed this story, like, comment, and subscribe.